Do you wish you could have seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy in cinemas on the big screen when they came out? Because this is a genuine question we should be asking, because there are a lot of people who are alive today that were not alive when those movies came out over 25 years ago. And so many people now, today, would have wished to have the chance to experience such an event on the big screen. And the reason I'm asking this, because I also want you to consider, what if you met someone who was alive during the time when those films were being screened for the first time, and they told you they chose not to watch them. And the reason they chose not to watch is because they heard that a woman killed the Witch King in a scene that lasts literally less than 5 minutes. And that is the reason why they chose to skip watching this movie. You would think that would be one of the stupidest things anyone could have ever done, missing out on what is understandably a generational event. And unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening right now, because a very vocal minority in their echo chamber, who have a problem with two very specific actors, are telling people to not go and watch what is the first movie filmed entirely in IMAX from one of the best directors of our generation, for a scene with a total runtime of less than 5 minutes of this 3-hour long movie. I'm of course talking about Christopher Nolan's version of The Odyssey, which I have just seen in IMAX theaters, and it's an experience I don't think people should be missing. And I think that the reason people are missing it is one of the stupidest reasons out there. I need to let people know that this is a movie that's not just a movie, it is legitimately an event that you don't want to regret missing out on, and it should be seen in IMAX if you're able to see it in IMAX. So no doubt you've heard already how good this movie is from everyone giving it rave reviews on every review platform. So some of you who have stumbled on this video might have no idea what I'm talking about, because you don't pay attention to a certain part of the internet, which is a good thing, and I hope you never do. And I'm going to make you aware of why, because there are a subset of YouTubers and people on Twitter who essentially are just very bigoted and hateful, and they rally against and get angry at any piece of media that has one of a few things that they don't like, and that usually is just minority people, like trans people of color, gay people. And they have a bottomless bucket of excuses to try and hide and justify their bigoted views by claiming that they're not racist, and they only care about things like historical accuracy, which is how they mask what is essentially their incredibly bigoted views by trying to give a just justification for it, which immediately falls apart when you take more than a glance at what they're trying to say. Because when you see that they're trying to argue for historical accuracy, and their argument for historical accuracy making a movie better is a 2004 movie that famously was ridiculed for not being historically accurate, is incredibly hilarious, and most sensible people can see through that. But unfortunately, we live in a day and age where AI has ruined everyone's brain, and most people don't think critically anymore, and they accept things at face value when presented to them, which is why we have such a problem with misinformation being spread. But The Odyssey is a fantastic movie with an enormous cast of big names who give their best performances in this movie, hands down. And I just have to say that if the reason you're choosing to miss out on watching this movie is because of two actors you don't like, the only thing I have to say about that is, if you're that upset about these two actors, just close your eyes when they're on screen. You're gonna miss less than 1% of the movie's total runtime. My opinion on all this discourse that too many people are paying attention to can be summed up in this meme of Soldier Boy I made from The Boys. Because too many people give too much time and energy on movies they're never gonna go see. And I don't know why people care about this shit. And I think people should just do what Christopher Nolan has been saying, which is just watch the movie before judging it. Don't let someone else decide for you if a movie is good or bad. Either watch it or don't. But I think social media has ruined people's brains and their understanding of boundaries and discussions in general, where everyone thinks that they need to have an opinion on everything, regardless of how much they know about the topic. You'll get people randomly on the internet, because something is in a public space, they think their 2 cents is needed on the topic, even if they know absolutely nothing about it. I've had people commenting on posts about movies they haven't even seen, and it happened recently as well, because the moment something gets popular, everyone wants to have an opinion on it. regardless of if they've seen it or not. And I think one of the clearest examples of this is the movie Obsession, which is a horror movie that everyone has been talking about. Again, regardless of if they've seen the movie or not, because there are so many people like this on the internet who want to talk about the movie, but they've not seen it. And they probably never will. Maybe they don't like horror movies, but because it's happening in a public space, everyone thinks that they should be part of the discussion because it's a new thing to be doing. And you'll get countless people like this asking questions that are answered within the movie. And I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if most people these days that are arguing about movies on the internet have only seen clips of the movie posted on TikTok and think that counts as having seen the movie. Because that's how little people understand the things they're discussing these days. We are currently living through a period of time where media literacy is at an all-time low. In fact, literacy in general is at an all-time low, but narcissism is at an all-time high, and people think very highly of themselves and think everyone should hear what they say, but they don't want to listen or read anything from anyone else, basically. I think one of the most clearest examples of this being a thing is a trend, I don't know what the correct word for this is, phenomena maybe, that's happening on BookTok, where people say that they only read the dialogue and skip through large sections of books because they want to be part of the discussion and get through a book as quickly as possible to join in, because they care about that more than they do about the actual media they're supposed to be engaging with. And this is something they openly admit to and judge the quality of books on, because they don't like it when a book has too many words on one page and it's all exposition and not just dialogue, as if they're supposed to be reading a script. But it's crazy to me to see how much hate is formulating and surrounding this movie from a director we know just does not miss. Like, legitimately, the trailer for The Odyssey has become one of the most disliked YouTube videos of this entire year because of the mass hysteria. There's no other word for it. It's mass hysteria regarding the hate campaign around the movie because of two actors they don't like appearing in the trailer for less than a few seconds. And I think this kind of hate is incredibly unhealthy and probably mentally detrimental. Like, this can't be good for your mental health to be this constantly angry about something you haven't even watched yet. Like, there are YouTubers out there who are putting out multiple videos like this days before the movie even came out. Like, some of these videos are hours long, and it's genuinely unhealthy to be obsessed, like this obsessed about hating a movie or two things. So do yourself a favor and don't let these people decide for you what you should and should not be watching. Now, Christopher Nolan is actually no stranger to having people on the internet be angry at him for a casting choice. 20 years ago, he had to deal with all of this from people being mad at him for hiring the rom-com and gay cowboy movie guy to play the Joker in his next Batman movie, which of course is Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. So we have a case of history repeating itself, with people on the internet not being happy with Christopher Nolan for a casting choice because of their own personal prejudice and bigoted hate, basically. If you want to know my own personal opinions about the movie and just my personal review about it, and I will preface this by saying that I am familiar with the story of The Odyssey and its various adaptations. My personal favorite adaptation is Epic the Musical. And when people ask me if I have read The Odyssey, I say, no, I haven't. I listened to it on audiobook the way Homer intended to have the story experienced. Because it was just an epic long poem that's meant to be recited and passed on verbally. Which is why I think Epic the Musical is the most definitive modern adaptation of the story. And in all honesty, what Nolan does with The Odyssey is no different to what he did with Batman in his Dark Knight trilogy, which is he took a story and he made it more grounded and realistic. And a lot of the changes he made to Batman and the lore of Batman strayed very heavily from the actual source material. And he took a lot of creative liberties and freedoms with that, and we got a very unique trilogy out of this. And it's no different to what he's done with The Odyssey. He's made a good number of changes, and a lot of the changes he made were made in favor of telling a more grounded and realistic story. And a lot of people are saying it's not historically accurate for things like the armor and a lot of anachronisms in the movie where things happen or characters are wearing things that wouldn't have existed in that time period, like the types of armor or weapons they were using. And to shock anyone who's not aware about this already, the Odyssey was actually written 500 years after the Mycenaean period of time and is actually full of anachronisms. So I think that actually is closer to the source material than people think it is. Because when Homer wrote down the Odyssey, it was full of things that did not happen during that time period, because he himself was not around that time. But there's one gripe I do have as someone who enjoys the story of the Odyssey, with every adaptation of The Odyssey, which does this without fail. And I can understand why they do it, but I need to explain to you how the story is presented for you to understand this. So almost every story retelling we've had of The Odyssey in modern times follows Odysseus in chronological order from the Trojan War to his return to Ithaca, and present him as essentially the narrator or the point of view character of the story from start to finish, so we see things through his eyes. But that's not how the Odyssey is written. The Odyssey actually begins on Calypso's Isle, and Odysseus is recounting his journey before he leaves the isle and returns to Ithaca. And this is very important, especially when you take into consideration follow-up books like the Aeneid written by Virgil, which takes place after the Odyssey. Because in the original telling of the Odyssey, when Odysseus is recounting his story after the Trojan War, we see him as this cunning military general who's very witty and brave. But when he returns to Ithaca, the version of Odysseus we see does not line up with the version of him we saw in his recounting of the story. And that's one of the twists in the Odyssey that gets lost in every adaptation, is the fact that Odysseus is an unreliable narrator, and the audience are meant to realize this when he returns to Ithaca and goes into hiding to look for the best opportunity to strike, because he's not being actually cunning or witty or brave. He's being deceitful and not honorable, which is one thing Nolan's version of the Odyssey does manage to capture. It shows Odysseus not respecting the fallen and the dead, and doing things that would advance him and might be seen as disrespectful during the time. That's one thing he does get right. But the reason this is such a big deal in the telling of the Odyssey is in the climax of the story, spoilers for anyone who hasn't read this 5,000-year-old story, is his wife Penelope asks the suitors to string up Odysseus' bow and fire an arrow through the axis, which is something that everyone knows about from the story, right? Because it's something that only Odysseus can do. And this is the climax of the story in the Odyssey, because at this point the audience are doubting if all the things Odysseus had said he could do were true or not. Which is why in the climax of the story, when Odysseus picks up the bow, he strings it and he fires the arrow through the axis, it's a big deal, because in that moment the audience realizes, oh, he was telling the truth. He really is this great hero that accomplished all of these things because he's shown that he's still able to do the arrow through the axis, which no one else could do. But then also at the back of your mind you're thinking, did he just get really lucky? Because that is also something that could have just happened. But I understand why most adaptations don't go that route, because they want to show Odysseus as this definitive heroic king who was wise and tricked the Trojans into losing the war with a wooden horse, because that's what he's most known for. But I'd rate The Odyssey by Nolan as a solid 9 out of 10. Definitely a movie I'll be watching again. I'll be owning it on 4K Blu-ray when it comes out. But I think it's one of those movies that I'll enjoy more and more as I watch it multiple times and spot more things. But definitely do make the first time you experience this movie in IMAX, if you can get to an IMAX theatre. Because like I said at the start, this is an experience you don't want to tell people you skipped out on because you've heard something other people tell you to do because it made them angry. Watch the movie for yourself and judge it for yourself. Don't be the person who slept on Lord of the Rings. And don't fall for manufactured outrage, because that's what it is. These guys are making these videos over and over again, being angry at whatever is popular at the moment. Because they know negative emotions like anger gets clicks and views and gets them the ad revenue. And you're basically being played. Don't be a secondhand thinker, decide for yourself. Don't let someone else do the thinking for you. Because if there's anything we know about people today, they don't do enough thinking for themselves, let alone for someone else. But that's just my thoughts on Christopher Nolan's version of The Odyssey. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff down below. I also live stream on this channel if you want to chat with me directly when I'm live. Make sure you ring the bell so you get notified when I do go live. And I hope you check out some of my other videos.